Excellent. So yeah, since Caitlin doesn't have a microphone, she is from Northeastern Iowa. And Chris, you're at Riverbend, yeah?
That is correct, yes. Food sourcing manager here at Riverbend.
Fantastic. My name is Anissa. I'm the advocacy project manager and with Riverbend. And I don't know, Liz, if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Liz Dieroff. I'm with Riverbend Food Bank as well. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here.
So thank you all for coming today. We have 20 to 25 minutes of kind of an overview and some examples for us to talk through. And then we've left time for questions or examples if you guys want to share stuff you're working on, and we can workshop it a little bit. So in terms of our agenda today, we're going to start just talk a little bit broad overview about the purpose of storytelling, some key elements. And after we go through the key elements, we have 2 samples that we'll kind of go through and have an interactive discussion on, you know, if they've captured all the key elements, if there are things that we could add, if there are things that might detract if we did add them. And then Liz is going to talk us through how Riverbend collects stories and repurposing stories for different social media or different marketing channels, right? Whether there's social media or newsletter or print or everything else. So unless anyone has any questions. Oh, Mike, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Just wanted to just say hi. Appreciate people plugging into this. If you've got time, Anissa, I'll tell just a short anecdote about why I think storytelling is so important. Does that fit in your agenda?
Yep,
so it is. I'll simply tell you about the first time I was in Dick Durbin's office. So that's, you know, senator from Illinois. I think at the time he was like Senate Minority Leader or something like that. We were there talking about food assistance programs, and I shared with him specifically about something we were talking about SNAP, and he's like, "Well, tell me a story about somebody that helped." And I said, "Well, you know, typically what we deal with is this." He said, "No, I want to hear a story." He's like, and I said, "Well," I said, "you know, it usually looks like this." And he's like, "Do you have a story?" And I didn't, and he was done with me. Okay, he turned to somebody else in the room, and somebody else, you know, fortunately, somebody from the Greater Chicago Food Depository said, "Well, I've got a story," you know, and so then he turned there, whatever, and he was done with me. Ever since then, I've never walked into any legislator's office without having one ready. It is important. They want this, and so that's why I just so much appreciate both the time you've taken to put this together to help people do well at this, because it really is essential for effective advocacy work.
No, I think that's a great example. And we do have, you know, one of the key audiences that we want to collect stories for, again, is definitely for advocacy work. Oh, Melissa, we have somebody new join. Melissa, did you want to introduce yourself? You're always allowed to say no in the chat. But we got a small group, so I figured we go around. Hearing nothing, I will go to the next slide. She can pop on if she feels the need at a later time. All right, so the purpose of storytelling. I mean, Mike just gave a really, really great example of one of the reasons that we need to collect stories about our work, right? Storytelling is a tool and a tactic, both for marketing, for fundraising, for advocacy. It's a powerful way to connect with our audience and to explain our successes, as well as give somebody a call to action, right? Here is a really great story about someone we served. This is why you should give money to us. This is why you should call your congressman, because SNAP is so important and we want to make sure we save it. This is why you should volunteer. These are the types of people you could help, right? So a lot of the audience use, oh, there's also just generalization. You know, the general public, a lot of the stuff we put on social media is aimed at the general public. Neighbors as well. You want to make sure that neighbors are comfortable coming in, right? Some people may, you know, be going through a hardship that, you know, isn't part of their, you know, it's been a shock. You know, we've seen a lot of this over the last 2 years. It's been a shock. I don't know if I should go in. Sharing stories about other people that use our services is going to help make other people more comfortable coming in and asking, you know, for food. volunteers, getting more volunteers, getting more money, and then policymakers as well. You can use these on multiple channels, right? Social media, newsletters, grants and proposals, websites, marketing materials, letters to the editor, and again, in-person meetings with policymakers, or when you send them emails or phone calls or whatever. So when we talk about storytelling, we want to make sure there's a couple key elements, right? We want to make sure we're authentic, that we're telling a story that doesn't sound made up. And that might sound like an obvious statement, but there are times, and I'm sure you've seen something, you know, on TV or on social media, and you're looking and you're like, I'm not sure I buy it, right? It happens more often than not. Well, no, I won't say more often than not, but it happens more often than you would think. You would think that, not that people are making up stories, that they just don't have the right tools to tell them in a way that evokes emotion, right? You want to use as much, as many references to your five senses as possible, to really make sure people can feel what is happening in your story. Images and infographics are also quite helpful. Videos. This has become more and more important, especially on social media over the last several years. I'm one of those people that, like, if somebody posts a video on Facebook, I just skip it, but I am in the absolute minority. Most people would prefer to watch a 30-second video than read something. And then as much, you know, descriptive prose as you can. You want to answer all the WH questions, right? So we're back to what, third grade English: who, what, when, where, how, by. As much information in terms of data that you can put in, and results. Results are incredibly important as well, especially when we're talking about storytelling for advocacy, right? This policy exists and it helped X amount of people, right? And as well as a call to action. Whether it's donate, volunteer, call your congressperson, sign up for newsletter, award a grant, engage on social media is another one that, you know, 10 years ago we weren't doing. Like there was never a call to click, right? But clicks become more important the way the algorithms work on social media. And so yeah. So when we look at this picture on the left, any suggestions for copy if we were to make this a social media post? You can, you know, unmute or drop it in the box. Oh, Melissa, yeah, absolutely. We will be, yeah, we will send the recording out for everybody. So what is, like, just kind of sample one versus sample two, right? Maya excitedly brings home fresh fruit from the food pantries so the family can take grandma on a picnic for the first time in almost a year. Will you donate to make more family reunions like this possible? Does that capture a lot of the key elements? Other options, you know, Maya's volunteering at the food bank for the first time. Her father wanted to understand what it means to give back. She excelled in watermelon stacking and will come back again next week. Will you join her? Right. There's a lot of ways that we could use this story. I know nothing about Maya. You would want to make sure it is accurate, right? And this is where we get into authentic. If Maya is a volunteer, you don't want to make her someone that's excitedly bringing home food for her grandmother. And vice versa, if she's a neighbor, you don't want to make her a volunteer. You know, that's one of the most important things about authentic. I don't actually know which Maya is. Do you know, Liz? Her name is also not necessarily Maya. I made that up too.
Now, this is a great image that we received from Feeding America, who goes out to different food pantries and food banks around their network and takes photos and things. So It is a great photo to use as an example in both of those ways, Anissa, for sure.
It just adds to what the power is, right? So like this is a stock photo and we use it like in PowerPoints like this, but for a post like you're just describing, Anissa, when we can get those actual pictures, even better, well, not even better, right? With the release to use it, and actually talk about a real person at a real place, it just adds so much impact to the story.
Yeah, and we have 2 examples we're going to work through now, and then Liz is going to walk through one example I think the next 2 examples are more, I suspect came from Feeding America. Liz will clarify for sure. But the examples that Liz is going to walk us through are from Riverbend. And like every time Lori shows up on my Facebook feed, I always make sure I like her because I love Lori's story so much. And we will share Lori's story with you in a minute. All right, so this is one of our social media posts. Again, it comes, Feeding America does a great job of sharing information. Oh no, this is volunteers. This is one of ours. I apologize.
Yeah, this is actually one of our volunteers at the St. Stephen's branch. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. I was like, oh no, wait, this one is ours. So National Volunteer Week Volunteer Month is in April, or Volunteer Week is in April, right? So a lot of nonprofits you'll see throughout your social media take advantage of that to really profile a lot of volunteers. And one of the things I think Riverbend does very well is they actually profile volunteers throughout the year, and then don't just leave it to the one week. But we're grateful to the volunteers who make our work possible. Today, we're recognizing Ron Ludwig, an 11-year volunteer at St. Stephen's branch. And you can go on to read the rest. But I wanted to look at this and go through the elements, right? And just kind of get a sense of whether or not you thought we covered all the elements, right? Authentic I think there's nothing more authentic than this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures ever. So much of the time, people do a lot of posing and smiling and cheering. And this guy was like, nope, taking my picture, I'm getting back on with my work. And you can feel his dedication, right, in looking at that picture. And I really, really appreciate that. What words in the post kind of evoke your senses? Is there anything there that particularly stands out in terms, if we're thinking about the 5 senses? I feel very tired looking at this post because Ron Ludwig sorts products, picks up donations, packs boxes, puts it all away. And I imagine he gets a very good workout doing that, right? That's the emotion. Those are the senses that I come away with a little bit there. I think it's really, really well crafted there. It answers a lot of our WH questions, right? Who is it? It's Ron. How long has he volunteered? 11 years. Where does he volunteer? St. Stephen's branch. What does he do when he volunteers? And we go through that list again. This post is particularly powerful, right? Because it also gets into data. It captures what Ron's contribution feeds into, which is 23 million meals each year, and how important volunteers are to that work. Now, what about a call to action? There's no call to action on this. Should it have been included? Is it more effective with or without? I just wanted to kind of ask some questions and see what people thought about that. I think you can go either way here, right? I think not having a call to action is very appropriate because we're celebrating National Volunteer Week, right? This is, a week that we want to make sure that we honor all of our volunteers, right? In and of itself, the idea of honoring volunteers is kind of a call to action. So spelling it out isn't necessarily a must in this. Caitlin likes the hashtag too. Yeah, hashtags are really important when we're looking at social media. You know, National Volunteer Week, if you don't know how the hashtags work, you know, you can click on it and you can see all the other posts that have used that same hashtag. And I'm speaking of Facebook there, you know, Twitter and Instagram, it's the same theory as well. And I really like the every action counts. Is that something that a lot of food banks use, Liz, or is that something you just kind of adopted?
So the Every Action Counts hashtag is actually Feeding America's tag for Hunger Action Month
Okay.
in September. But it is used kind of all year round, every once in a while. And so there in the personal social media world, a lot of times you'll see people use hashtags almost in a sort of sarcastic or just an extra descriptor for their very emotional post. But then, as you mentioned, in the professional side of things, we usually use hashtags on social media to categorize things.
Mhm.
So whenever I do a post that involves volunteers or individuals or groups hosting food and funds drives, a lot of times I'll use that Every Action Counts hashtag because it then feeds into that larger list of categorized posts that all fall into those same sort of those same areas. And then, as you mentioned, you can search by a specific hashtag on any of those platforms and see all of the posts that relate to that. So going forward with our Riverbend Food Bank posts, there will be a couple of hashtags that I think I'm going to start using more regularly, in addition to that Every Action Counts hashtag, which would make it fairly easy then for any of our partner pantries to search by that hashtag in any of the platforms and then simply share one of our posts to help yourselves kind of get into that momentum of what kinds of posts to put out there on social media if it's not something that your pantry does very frequently, because it can get kind of overwhelming if you get down the rabbit hole of social media. But those will be some good ways if you follow some of those specific hashtags. You can pull posts from Feeding America, from Riverbend Food Bank, and simply share them with you know, a little bit of your own content and have a great post to reach lots of people.
Yeah, and maybe in our next newsletter to the partner agencies, we can give them a list of ones, because I know we've been sharing some social media posts that they can share. Let's put some hashtags in the next partner agency update. Because yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to mention it as well. You know, I do a lot of volunteer social media stuff for a couple different organizations I volunteer for, and sometimes you're just tired, and I just like need to click a hashtag. You know, one of them is League of Women Voters, right? And it's nice to just Google a hashtag, because I cannot think of something creative to do, or you know, it's a volunteer position, right? And a lot of the partner agencies that we work with around the service area, you know, they're volunteer run, right? They need a little assistance on this. So searching for hashtags is an incredibly easy way to make one's marketing a little bit easier on social media. Did anybody have any other comments about this particular post? All right, we will go to the next one then. This is, I'm not going to read the whole story, but largely Mercedes is a mother and son. The woman ran, you know, was hardworking. She got sick. The two of them, she had to move in with her son, and they ended up, you know, working with a local food pantry in order to get assistance, right? The pantry is a partner. This is how you can tell this is something that Feeding America has distributed, right? The pantry is a partner food bank of the Feeding in America network, and everything else. Now, does this answer all of our different senses, right? I'm going to just pause a second and give everybody a chance to read. But think about those WH questions, emotions, senses, and data as you're reading through. And, you know, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any comments or drop them in the box. Things you like, things that are particularly impactful. So in terms of evokes emotions and senses, I really like the way this starts with this idea that Mercedes was in charge, right? She was the helper. She was the one that used to help people, and now she needs help. I think that really, you know, the dichotomy is going to really show most readers, you know, how this was a big change for her. She had to move in her son to take care of her. You know, that's also the kind of thing a lot of people can relate to, especially, you know, over the last 2 years, we've had a lot, you know, we've as a community have been doing a lot more of helping other people out. But I think, you know, mothers and sons probably did most of the time. We've got all of our WH questions taken care of, right? We've got Mercedes. We know who the picture is. We know who her son is. We know what happened to her. She got sick and she has mobility issues. I really like the way they focus on the results here, right? So because of their visiting the local food pantry, Manny doesn't have to worry about his mother anymore because she has fresh food, right? That both captures the results of, you know, what you can get out of a food pantry, but we're also capturing some emotions there. There's no data in this one. Or call to action. And I'm just curious, again, you know, same question, are there places we could have had data? Is it necessary? Is it a good enough story without the data or the call to action? Anyone have any thoughts or?
I mean, I'm chuckling in these only because the you're tapping into kind of the right brain, left brain struggle. Honestly, if you put me and Liz together, you get right brain and left brain. So, you know, I'll basically like, here's all statistics. Here's how the engineer proves that hunger is an issue. And then Liz is like, oh, but we got to add the feeling to it. And between so I'd say with many of our communications wrestle, oh, that's too much. Too many numbers. Oh, that's not enough numbers. And you know, it's absolutely a Goldilocks thing where, you know, we want not too much, but not too little.
And in this case, I think they, again, you know, you hit the nail on the head right there, right? This is for Facebook. This is 3 years ago, this would have been a very long post for Facebook, right? You know, adding more data or call to actions might result in people not clicking that read more button. You know, you'll see more posts of this size today, but I do think, you know, Mike hit it on the head, right? The Goldilocks, right? If we add too much more, I don't know if it's going to create any more impact than what it already has. And largely, again, I think that has to do with length more than anything else. All right, so those are my samples. And I'm going to turn it over to Liz. If you just want to like tap your eyeglasses when you want me to click, I will try to be better than I usually am.
Sure. I can do that. Thank you, Lisa. They're bright enough. You can see them pretty well through the screen. Chris, you unmuted for a moment. Did you have something a question or something you wanted to share?
I was just going to go back and say on both of those stories we talked about, I find it interesting if we could actually record those people telling their own story. To me, hearing people say it themselves has a lot more impact than just the words. So to be able to hear the son talk about his mom, I think to me would be really impactful in that.
Yeah, I think, and you are the norm, right? Most people want to see more video these days. And so, and luckily between Canva and our phones, right, video becomes much easier. And at the same time, people are less concerned about production value, especially when it comes to social media, right? Like if you're putting something on TV, you still want it produced well, but if you're putting it on social media, the norm is use your phone and, you know, whatever clicky editing you can do right there.
Right.
Thanks for that very much.
Yeah, that's a great segue from both of you, because that I'll share with you kind of my approach as of late in collecting stories, and that feeds right into that. So this again for a partner pantry who might have a couple of volunteers that work part-time to serve the pantry guests when you're open, this might seem like an overwhelming thing. Well, how do I even start? How do we tell our stories and in a good way, and how do we collect them to begin with? I always think of things from the strategic approach. So I start by determining what kind of stories I want to collect. Just about anyone can tell you a good story. So don't think that you have to check a bunch of boxes of, well, I need a person who's, this age or older, or I need to have a woman, I need to have a man, I need to have a child, I need to, all of those different components. Anyone's story, as Anissa mentioned earlier, can be relatable if told in the right way, and shared through lots of different channels. So with that in mind, often I'll think about, okay, do we have a particular program that we need more people to be aware of? Or do we have something new coming up, or a milestone that we want to celebrate, or some type of service that we know is probably going to be really helpful at a certain time of year or a certain month that we want to make sure people know about. If you start there, then you're actively looking for the people and the stories that relate to that purpose. And that'll make it a little bit easier. If you're coming at your stories with a particular context, then you're more likely to ask the questions that you need to have answered, and make sure that that person shares all the details that relate to that purpose that you want to relate to your audiences. So knowing that will help you pinpoint the stories you want to collect, and then prioritize also. So you can kind of filter through maybe that volunteer who says, oh, I talked to somebody the other day and they have this great story, and you should collect it from them. If that fits the purpose that you're hoping to approach all these stories with, then great, yes. As one of our consultants says, and I like to steal frequently, having that strategy in place won't necessarily tell you what to say yes to, but it will tell you what to say no to. And that can help greatly when you're working with just a couple of volunteers, or you need to be the one-man show and do all of the pieces to collect and share and disseminate stories. So the way that I've started to approach things is, just as Anissa said, and as Chris alluded to, is capture video. I will take my phone. I have a delightful iPhone that I've been using to record. And if you do check out our video story on Lori Cipher, who's a pantry guest at one of our senior living complexes in East Moline, that was all shot on my iPhone and then edited through just regular software on the computer, which is very simple and not production level television quality, obviously. But again, as Anissa mentioned earlier, having your pantry share stories in a very authentic, real way actually does a lot more for you than having something that looks like it's fancy and produced by some independent company, especially on social media, but in other channels as well. People do appreciate seeing your stories and seeing your content from a perspective that looks really real and authentic. It tells them that you are taking the time to do this, and that you do need their support and help in however you can get it. So the secondary way to help make these stories a little more bite-sized and help you collect them is to get something in writing too. So we have a couple of folks that I've talked with just in email and said, hey, will you answer a few of these questions for us? And that particularly has been with a couple of our partner pantries. We love to be able to tell your stories. So in addition to hopefully inspiring you and giving you some tools to collect your own stories, please feel free to share your stories with us and let us kind of take those on and share them with all of our audiences as your stories, showing that network and how much we all are connected together, and making this crucial work of hunger relief possible in our community is impactful to general public and to our volunteers and donors as well. So with a couple of our pantries, I've said, okay, here's about 5 questions. If you could answer those in an email, send them back to me along with a couple of photos, that would be great. And so Becky Gruhl, our Director of Agency Partnerships, has really helped support that as well. So we have a couple of stories that are on our social media, and one that will appear in our upcoming newsletter that will go out at the very beginning of March. And those were purely collected from me sending a couple of different emails and getting a photo from the pantry. And then we're able to share that out through social media, through our website, and through our printed newsletter. Well, let me just make sure I'm covering everything easily enough. And so those written stories too can be a really great way to grab just a few bites of information that you might need for a grant application or for a grant report. Folks in a lot of those different foundations like to see their impact, just like our donors and general public do. And so if you've got those few questions answered via email, or handwritten from a note or something, along with a photo, that can be pulled as just a short quote to include in a grant report or in an application to show how impactful your program can be. And then you can share them in all these other different communication channels as well. I'll tap my glasses. Is that, yeah. So the other way that we've started to implement something without having a team of people that I can send off into our pantries and to our world to capture all these stories, we have a bit of a self-service option as well, which could be an option for you or our pantry partners. Through your website or through a simple email. We have this form on our website right now, which I will push out every once in a while through our social media channels, and then in our quarterly newsletters in print, inviting people to share their stories, and just going to the website and telling us a little bit about themselves and how the food bank has been part of their life. Our form also has an option to upload short video or short small file sizes for photos, so that we can kind of capture all the senses in one fell swoop, and then I can disseminate them. Again, this is something I would love for our partners to utilize too, and we are absolutely happy to if someone goes to our form and says, yeah, I worked with Genesis Garden, and this is what I saw as a volunteer, blah blah blah. We'll share that back with you for sure. All that information is very helpful to all of us involved. Let me pull up here. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Me too.
No. So again, we wanted to circle it back to the advocacy side of things, and make sure that once you've collected these stories and then you're getting ready to share them out, make sure that they do check these boxes. The number one, making sure that your organization is okay with you sharing the types of stories that you're collecting. And then making sure that the person's story is told from a respectful and dignified standpoint. One of the ways that you can help with that is to, on the front side of capturing a story, is to talk with that person and say, your story would be really helpful to share, and I think be encouraging to other people. Here's how I want to share it. Here's what I would like to share. And here's the time frame that I think we're going to use, and here are the different places that I think we are going to share this story. How does that all sound? And make sure that at the very beginning of a story collection process, that person you are working with knows exactly the details of everything that's involved, and then give them the opportunity to say, well, this is the most important part of my story, or this is something that I'll share with you, but I don't really want that to be the focus or to be out into the world, so that you can both feel equal equal agency with that story. And that will also help you really be authentic when you're telling it. And then the marketing side of things, make sure that they have a signed release form. We do have a template that all of our agency partners are welcome to use. It is on the forms and resources page of our agency zone of the website. And you can download that, add your own organization's name in. It is not a legal document. I am not a lawyer, but it is a kind of standard release form that if you have one of those signed by the person whose story you're going to share, it does lay out again in writing, this is how we're going to use your story. This is what we're going to use it for. And then their signature kind of puts you both into a good spot, knowing that everyone is okay with how the story will be produced and who has the rights to the story, et cetera, et cetera. In that dignity side of things, you're wanting to make sure that the person you're portraying is portrayed as an authentic, real individual, and that you're not swaying too far to one side or the other, and making the story in such a way that invokes feelings of, oh, this person is a hero, they're saving all of these other people by being this glorious volunteer and donor, or that the people who are facing hunger are these innate victims who can't help themselves and can't do anything without our support. That's our organization sticks right in that middle ground with that. And we come from the place of everyone working together can help make the community better. So from the person who's facing hunger, they are a unique individual with great potential who is facing a specific challenge or crisis in their life that they need support in order to get through and move forward from. And the same thing with our donors and supporters and volunteers. They are working with us so that we can do all of these fantastic things and our whole community together can be better. Those messages tend to resonate better with our audiences. And as Anissa said, the longer posts previously in a couple of years ago may have just gone to the wayside and you would have just scrolled past them on social media, but people are really more interested in reading a slightly longer story or seeing a slightly longer video if it feels very authentic and it feels like someone that they can relate to, or it feels like it's something that they are a part of. So keep those things in mind. That is all I have on those slides, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. This is me too. Oh yeah. Okay, so the main piece to this webinar, which is to tell you how to collect those stories and then how to disseminate them. There's maybe some reasons where at times you'll want to take a completely different story for your newsletter than you would use on social media or as a video on your website or YouTube. But for the most part, if you've got a great story, you can piece it out in different ways and use different parts of it in different platforms, and it can be multi-purposed. And on the marketing side of things, it does build branding consistency as well. Your audiences may not be everywhere. So if you just put a story out through one channel, you may miss a whole segment of the people who care about your organization and could volunteer or support or need your help. So you can save time and you can have some consistent messaging, but it can also help you reach different sectors of your audience in an easier way than recreating the wheel and doing different stories on every single platform. You'll see there we've got some kind of best practices for the different social platforms and for print and other electronic channels. And those are just good to follow just because that's the nature of those different communication channels, and following some of those best practices when you're repurposing your stories will help get the most reach and help impact the most people. Oh yeah, so one example of repurposing is a food dating video that we created.
Actually, I was going to do Lori.
Do Lori's first? Sure.
Yeah, that was my bad. Sorry.
My name is Lori Cyphers. My husband grew up around here. So when he got out of the service, we moved back here. We've lived here in the towers since December 22nd of 2012. I've seen a lot of changes over those years, you know, and I think the pantry was one of the biggest positive changes that we had. We had received so much from the food pantry that when we got the stimulus, he made a donation both times. I was a caregiver for my husband for about 12 years, and he passed this past February. I saved enough for my rent and a couple little things. There's a wide variety. It's nutritious. We get meat, veggies, and fruit, cereal. I mean, little bits of everything. It has saved so many people so much money. So they're not, you know, doing just, you know, a can of soup a day at the end of the month. A lot of people here, they don't have their own transportation. We have the food pantry. When my husband first passed, I didn't get out that much. Right now we have 4 granddaughters and 2 grandsons on the way. The food that I get from the food bank, it's like, a couple of weeks ago, we got big hams. So it's like we all get together, and I cooked up the ham, and we had our Sunday dinner, and we just sat and chatted, and kids played, and it allows you to do so much more, you know, than you were able to do before. Having that time available and not having to worry about where your next meal is coming from. It's been such a blessing.
So I don't know if Liz, if you wanted to share how Lori came to your attention. You already explained how you collected that story, which was, I actually thought that was produced. So you did a fantastic job on your cell phone there.
Thank you. Yeah, so this was the director at the pantry who works with the residents at Illini mentioned it to us, and I think Becky may have been involved too. It's been a while. This one was one of the first ones that we did. So it just started with, you know, hey, this is this person, and yes, she would like to talk to you. She wants to share her story, which is the first important part, is to make sure the person is willingly sharing their story with you. So I just set up a quick, I sent a quick email. I laid out just what I talked about a little bit earlier with the director and with Lori. Here's how we're going to use it. Here's how much time I think it'll take of yours to do this. And then here's the time frame where it'll be done, and then I'll send you the copy to make sure that everything is accurate and we're portraying you in the right light and all that. And then then I took that, I used some other footage that we had and some other photos that we already had on hand, and used the Microsoft video editor to do this story. And then her story also I transcribed and wrote out, and we submitted it to the newspaper as a brief editorial, and then also put it up onto our website. And then we shrunk it slightly and used it as part of a social media post along with the video itself. And when we, it's just so impactful that it works in a variety of ways. So on the next slide, Anissa will show you, we also then took that, so there's how it looked on our website as a blog story for people who might want to just read it and not necessarily see the video. And then we also, the red squared outline is a brief blurb where we just use a quote and her photo, and that was included in our newsletter as kind of a call to action for other people to share their stories as well. And Yeah. So I want to give plenty of time for other folks to jump in and have us workshop a little bit. And so I'll stop talking.
I don't know, Caitlin or Melissa, if you had anything you wanted to share or wanted feedback on, or any questions in general. And of course, Chris and Becky and Mike, but we wanted to give our partners first go at it. Well, always feel free to reach out to either Liz or myself. Any of the partner agency or any of the advocacy newsletters have our information in it. If you have questions on workshopping and storytelling, all of the webinar recordings and materials from the webinars you can find right on our website. And it's so easy to find because it's just forms. Nothing too difficult to remember, right? And that has our advocacy toolkit that brings together all of the different webinars that we've done and provides information. And you can also, on that same page, get the video release template that Liz was speaking about earlier. So unless there are any questions, I think we will just say, thank you for giving us your Friday. And I think Mike wants to wave goodbye. Okay.
Just appreciate your work and appreciate you and Liz pulling this together, and just anyone for taking the time to participate or to watch this, because it's just an important element of engaging the community in this work. So thanks so much.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. And this recording will be up on the agency zone early next week. We'll send out a follow-up email with some of the links and the information that we talked about, along with the webinar recording link as well. And if there are other types of webinars or education that we can help with that you would like to have us share in the coming months, please let us know. Reach out to Anissa or myself or Mike or Becky, and tell us what you'd like to learn about, and we're glad to throw some other things into the mix to help you out as much as we can.
And Becky usually pops on. She's feeling under the weather today, but I know she says hi. I think she's been chatting. All right, well, everyone, then you guys have a great weekend. And yes, do reach out with any questions. And thank you again for joining us.